Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Anna Soslova. I'm part of the marketing team here at Axonius. In case you're not familiar with Life as a CISO, this is our webinar series spotlighting influential security leaders from across the industry. And in today's webinar, you'll hear a Q&A session between our host, Lenny Zeltser, who is the CISO at Axonius, and Jeffrey Gardner, Senior Director of Information Security at Landmark Health. Before I hand it over to Lenny and Jeff, I just wanted to give our audience a quick reminder that this session is being recorded, so you'll be able to access it after the webinar wraps up. And you'll also receive an email from me with a link to the recording. If you forgot or didn't fill in your IC² member ID when you registered, please email it to me as soon as possible to anna@axonius.com and I'll add it for you. And with that intro, I'd like to thank both Jeff and Lenny for being here today, and I'll hand it over to you, Lenny.
Thanks, Anna. Hi, everybody, and thanks to Jeff for being willing to chat with me. We're both responsible for information security at two very different organizations, and here's a chance for me to learn from Jeff's experience and for all of us tuning in to also consider what's it like to be a leader in information security within a company nowadays. And each one of our perspectives is probably a little bit different, but we can all learn a lot from each other. So yeah, Jeff, thanks for being here.
Happy to be here.
Wanted to start off by asking you a little bit, what's it like for you to work in an organization today that is in the business of providing healthcare to people? Now during the COVID-19 pandemic, how have the pandemic requirements on security affected your role, if at all?
So, Landmark was kind of founded, back in 2013 to provide in-home healthcare for critically ill patients. So we started off basing our infrastructure around a large remote workforce. So, technology and security-wise, we really baked that in up front. But really, with the COVID crisis, it's kind of shifted. There's always going to be the CIA triangle. It's kind of shifted a little bit more towards the A. Because everyone's working remotely, everyone has to do, it has to be up. So we kind of had to shift some of our security requirements, like new projects, and really focus on getting the most security that we can, but really the key is availability, especially right now. So, normal protections that we put in place, we've had to soften a little bit because people have internet issues, they have connection issues, so we can't, lock everything down as much as we could. So some resources that wouldn't normally be available externally, we've had to slightly open it up and, really rely on compensating controls more than, really locking it down at the infrastructure level. So it's a slight twist.
How do you go about making these types of risk decisions? Some of these you're probably allowed to make on your own. Some perhaps require buy-in from other stakeholders. When you need to balance the likes of availability versus security, for example. What's involved in making sure that you and others made the right decision? Who participates in that kind of decision-making?
Yeah, the first step is always identifying who are the stakeholders in any of these projects. So who are the critical people that I have to get buy-in from? And that's somewhat of a challenge because some of these issues, may involve HR, they may involve even marketing, they may involve finance, including IT. And then how do we get everyone together, especially now that everyone's remote? We can't call everyone into a boardroom and say, hey, let's all sit down and deal with this. I can't tap people on the shoulder and say, hey, I want to talk to you, give me 5 minutes. So we have to structure it a little more. But really, it's just communicating and figuring out what everybody's real need is. Like getting down, I don't want to call it brass tacks, but like what's everybody want out of this project? I know we'd like to have A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. That would be amazing. But if we had to pick, 3 of these 6 things that we want, what are our critical needs for this project? And then take that and see how they interface with security. Because there's going to be some things, for example, Zoom versus Microsoft Teams. We have both of these tools in-house. What do we use for transmission of PHI? What can't we transmit PHI on? They both have their limitations, participant size, collaboration abilities. So it's really figuring out what the end user or the customer, in this case, if it's HR, if it's IT, what they need. And then figuring out how can we best protect it if there's compensating controls, if there's built-in controls, like the Zoom, making it auto-require a password, telling people to lock it after they join a meeting. If there's things we can do that aren't necessarily technical, that may be procedural, it's really taking a step back and looking at it holistically and going, okay, what all is involved with this project? Not just IT, but everything when it comes to communication, users, all of that. So that's somewhat of the struggle. The higher up you go, you have to you can't get so deep in the weeds. You kind of have to take a broader view and look at it really from a user's perspective as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. This is one of the difficult things for me as well, getting all the people together, not just in person, but sometimes even finding time for everybody to get together on a remote call for certain decisions where the risk is high enough that executives, for example, need to be informed and involved in making the right decision. Just coordinating everybody's tough. In our case, we've got, just like in yours, I suspect multiple time zones are involved. When you think about at some point, perhaps quarantine restrictions continuing to ease to the extent that more of your employees will be working together in the same buildings, have you already began thinking about what you will need to undo or any kind of a plan to return back to what we might call normal? Or is it too early?
Yeah, no, that's actually been part of we've added that as a part of our project, kind of like a return to office task in there. So for example, if it's, say, conditional access for Office 365, if we made any modifications to that, what settings do we have to revert back to normal, and what offices have we made these changes at? So it's really keeping track of all those things and keeping it in the project plan so we know, which is kind of, where change control really plays a nice part in that. If you don't track your changes, you're not going to know how to revert things. So it's really been an exercise in change control as well, putting our change control process through its paces.
Yeah. If those people who have spent a lot of time in application development are certainly familiar with the need to accept certain trade-offs, and when, I don't know, developing code, building applications, I think in that context, the word backlog is commonly used, where you say, look, I know it's important, we got other priorities right now, let's put it on the backlog. And the question is, do you ever come back to the backlog, or does it keep growing and growing? I feel like here's a chance for a lot of security professionals to become more familiar with what our counterparts in software development sometimes do. And sometimes I think security folks don't quite appreciate the challenge of finding the time to go back to the backlog and get things done correctly.
It's always a balancing act. It's really almost evaluating risk. You've got 10 tasks on your plate for today, and you've got 50 in your backlog. How do you risk rank those, and how do you move them in and out of your circles? I mean, there's going to be things transitioning all the time. I mean, it's called like a bullseye. So I have a whiteboard. In the middle of the bullseye are things I have to do today. The next ring outside of that bullseye are things I got to do this week. Ring, the outermost ring is things I got to do just in general, and then things outside of that are really, that's my backlog. Things are always going out of the inner circle and coming into it, and sometimes something on that backlog may pop up that's related, and I have to move that in. So it's always this shuffling of tasks. It's almost like for developers, like a Kanban board. You're taking things off, putting it on, and it's a never-ending whirlwind of activity. But that's what we signed up for. That's why we're here.
Yeah. When I think about what people in security leadership roles have to think about when returning or undoing, returning to normal, let's say, undoing or making up for some of those short-term decisions in the long term, as you pointed out, it's going to take time. And I think what that means is that it will really slow down the velocity at which many of the teams are used to moving. When I think about the continuous improvement of any security program that you want to see in any organization, right? There's always something you can do better. Maybe, I don't know, build a SOC or create more custom alerts from your SIM tool, or tune that EDR, or do better at documentation. There'll be less time to do that because we will have to set the time aside to revisit a lot of our decisions. And it's going to be frustrating, I think, for a lot of us who are used to moving perhaps faster than
we're doing that now. We're already doing that now, though. I mean, one of the bigger challenges, at least that I see for people not being in an office, is the engagement. with their security teams. How do you stay in front of the user? How do you keep letting them know that you're here to keep training them? They don't ever see you. They don't ever interact with you. They may get emails or they may see you on a company meeting, but there's none of that back and forth, you know, hey, I'm here. So that adds more workload because you have to overcompensate in some areas to make up for that loss of the personal touch. And then you have to scale back on some of these that you're already doing. So continuous improvement kind of almost takes a back seat to just keeping the lights on right now. I mean,
Yes.
we're barely doing it if we can. I mean, if we're working on something, we see a better way, absolutely, we'll incorporate it into our process. But it's not like normally where we're looking for these things where we can improve efficiency. That's just not happening right now.
I wonder whether the auditors will be as understanding when they ask you, you said you're going to do this and this last year. You didn't do it yet. Why not? A lot of us, I think, will have to spend time explaining the reality and the strong impact that the pandemic had on everybody, including the security teams. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully they're taking that into consideration. I mean, you know, depending on what you're being audited against, some of that may already be in place. But, you know, this year specifically for us, we're being audited against a whole new version of Hightrust. It's 9.3. Well, it's not a whole new version, minor upgrade, 9.3. So that, you know, revamps some existing controls. It adds new controls. So it's really, can we meet these new controls with the program that we had? Because if you base your controls around, program around NIST, CSF, whatever framework of your choice, you may already have them in place. But if you don't, how are you going to address that cap that you're going to have with the Hightrust auditors when they come in house to say, yeah, we literally can't do this right now. We have to wait for 3 months for things to settle down. I mean, it's going to be a different year in terms of audits for sure.
Yeah, and how do you present the evidence that the controls actually exist the way that you think they do when the auditor can't just walk around and see for themselves? Yeah.
How do you gather the evidence?
Mm-hmm.
In some, like if you don't have, a modern EDR tool where you can pop a shell on some of these boxes and take run PowerShell commands to, pull the firewall state, pull the registry, pull some of these things. How do you obtain it if they say, give me 100, I want a screenshot of 100 laptops, or I want evidence for these 100 laptops. If you haven't built it out to be that way from the beginning, that's going to be a major forklift for everybody involved, especially users and help desk techs, because with the technology, I don't have to involve the user. I can collect them myself. Now I have to interrupt them in their already busy workday for us to, remote into their system, collect screenshots, take an hour, half hour of their day, maybe multiple times throughout this audit.
Yeah.
That's also part of that communication piece. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, as tough as the sudden dispersal of everybody's workforce has been on everybody, I hope that it presented some security and IT teams with an opportunity to deploy some of the things that they've been asking for, but never quite got the funding. Right? Tools like what you just described, the ability to remotely connect and investigate a potentially infected system or to gather certain evidence from a box. I hope that some of us were able to get the funding to maintain security of a remote workforce, and those tools we wanted to deploy anyway. Now the organization found a reason to approve that funding, and these tools will stay with us and will help us in the long term. So I'm always looking to find the silver lining in a bad situation. Maybe this is it.
Well, I mean, it makes us innovate. Maybe you don't have the budget to buy a full-blown EDR solution, yet your organization still needs it. What do you do? It's going to force you to get out of your normal comfort zone of, going to a licensed vendor and maybe exploring some open source options like GRR or a Velociraptor for, EDR. It'll make you investigate some of it, and maybe you'll get some cost savings in there as well. And maybe you have a project on your plate and you'll relook at the options that are out there and go, I don't need to buy X. I can do Y with this other tool, and I can save, the organization 50 grand, which we can reinvest somewhere else. I mean, it breeds that, spirit of innovation that comes when people are hard pressed. And that's one of the things where, adversity breeds innovation, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You mentioned some of the things earlier related specifically to healthcare. You talked about Hightrust, which is, of course, something you must do if you're leading a security organization in a healthcare-focused environment. I wanted to ask you how you acquired that kind of industry knowledge, because I know when you came into Landmark Health, you were an outsider to the industry, right? I think that was about 3 years ago. You
Yep.
came into the organization.
Roughly about 3 years. Yeah.
And you didn't have any healthcare experience beforehand. What was it like?
Zero.
How did you get the appropriate industry expertise to be successful?
Yeah, it was diving into the deep end of the pool, for sure. But one of the first things that I did was, make sure there was really no daylight between, myself and the compliance team. So that was kind of one of the first people that I went to. And actually, when I joined, my department was under compliance. So it really made it somewhat easier for me because I reported to the chief compliance officer at the time. So I really got, an immersive education. Think holding a 10-pound weight over my head while I'm trying to tread water, for the first year. But it's just a mindset shift, because Hightrust itself is just harmonizing essentially, to me, it's harmonizing other frameworks, PCI, NIST, and it's matching it up with what HIPAA demands. So there's some wording differences, and there are some, differences in approaches to controls, but really at the end of the day, it's just figuring out how to map. And there are tools out there to help you map, Hightrust, NIST controls. So if you built your program around NIST, you can map those back and forth and go, oh, okay, this matches this, matches this, matches this, and really figure out where you're not hitting the mark. So it's just really finding all that stuff out and mapping what I already know to how it relates to Hightrust and HIPAA. And it took about a good year for me to wrap my head around. It's this voluminous thing. It's 19 domains, so many odd controls. It's a lot to process.
Do you have an opinion on the usefulness of Hightrust? I know I used to be in the world of PCI DSS, and people were always bad-mouthing it because, that was in vogue, I suppose. What's the word on the street about Hightrust?
So the word on my street with Hightrust, it's a good place to start. It's always good to have some kind of framework. You're not required to have Hightrust. You have to be HIPAA compliant, but Hightrust is one of those niceties. It's really just a standardized assessment and compliance framework. So it's good. But what I've found in talking to, people in healthcare, now that I'm in it, it's organizations will become Hightrust compliant, and then that's kind of where their program will stop. Mm-hmm. And the questions will go, well, why do I need to do X or Y? It's not required by HIPAA or Hightrust. And what I always come back is, if there's an investigation, there's some kind of a breach, some kind of an incident, something that isn't necessarily related to PHI, and you go, well, I'm Hightrust compliant. If I were an investigator, I'd be like, that's fantastic. Why didn't you do these other things, which you should have been doing in the first place? Why did you stop at Hightrust?
Yes. And just to clarify, what you're alluding to is that Hightrust, as well as HIPAA, care a whole lot about patients' information, but they don't care about anything else. Is that what, right? Other stuff that you might need to protect is outside the scope, so you got to rely on other frameworks for that. Did I understand you correctly?
They do care somewhat. It does involve a lot of stuff that's not related to PHI, continuous monitoring, auditing, encryption, endpoint protection, not necessarily related to PHI, but they do have some stuff in there. It just kind of more, I just don't like that organizations stop right there. And that's what I've seen a lot of. It's not like in tech, which I've also, dipped in, where they're always trying to stay up, with best practice. It's always best practices, best practices, best practices. We're in, verticals where there's regulations. It's, let's comply with our regulations, let's comply with their regulations, let's comply with their regulations. And then anything after that, not all organizations, but, some will be like, we'll accept that risk. Mm-hmm. And if it comes down to it, that's where the innovation kind of comes into play. Or if you can't get the funds, you as a security practitioner may have to implement think laterally, chain together solutions you may never have chained before if you had the money, but you don't. So it's like, okay, or you try and find, new innovative solutions, go with some of the smaller startups. Normally you wouldn't do in a larger organization, with a $2 million, $3 million, $5 million, $10 million budget. If you got a $100,000 budget, you're really going to be picky and choosy about the solutions that you put in place.
Yeah, for sure. And it's amazing how someone who leads a security organization needs to have a balance of the technical skills to understand kind of the requirements and what you must have and what you might need to build yourself if you don't have a budget for it. At the same time, you also need to speak the language of regulators and talk to auditors and controls and frameworks. Yeah, it's a difficult mix to achieve. Though maybe I'm incorrect at assuming that a CISO or somebody in a similar role really needs to have both of these kind of general compliance focused skills and technical skills. Maybe you can be successful with just one of those sets. What do you think?
It really depends on who you surround yourself with or who you are surrounded with. If you as a CISO are also charged with compliance, you have to be kind of that person with the dual role. If you're in a large organization where maybe you have a chief compliance officer and a CISO, you can kind of split those duties and rely on each other. One to manage the more technical aspects, the other to make sure that those technical things that you're doing are matching up with compliance frameworks. That's awesome. But that's not what everybody is going to find themselves stepping into. And the soft skills, I like how you mentioned that, because that's one of the things that I've seen. I try and my people to groom into them. I bring them into meetings and I let them speak. Where other times it may be just the CISO having that talk. You need to learn how to talk the executive talk. And what does that look like? And some of that is, letting them spend a day with me and being like, this is my day. I will look at my calendar, see all these meetings. This is what I do on a daily basis. Here's how I present information to people. Here's how many emails. When I say I don't have a lot of time to read emails, this is why I tell you that. It's because look at my inbox. I have 300 items waiting for my reply. I'm not trying to brush people off. I literally have maybe a minute to 2 minutes to read every email. And I find that's true with a lot of execs because we are balancing these multiple roles. So it's when you're presenting something like a business case or a presentation, me as a tech guy, I want to have data. I will have 100-slide PowerPoint of all the data you can possibly imagine, and we'll get into it. I'll teach you string theory by the end of this presentation if that's what it takes, to make it happen. But realistically, you've got like a slide or two at most. So what do you put on that slide, which will have the most impact to the people you're presenting to? And that's where knowing what the executive team wants and building those relationships really comes into play.
That's great advice. And that's the big challenge. It's, I guess, somehow developing empathy for someone who's in a different role and trying to get into their mind. And how do you, though, figure out what do they want? You're presenting to a CFO, you're presenting to a CIO, you're presenting to, head of technology. You don't have their jobs. You don't have the same education as they do. How do you figure out what they want?
That was kind of a gut check I had to make pretty early on, because we all want to come into the room as a subject matter expert. We all want to present ourselves from, a position of authority. But, going into a new organization when you haven't been there, I had to just take a step back and be like, okay, and just ask, what do you care about? What do you want to see? I'm going to present on X topic. I don't know you from Adam. So what do you care about with regards to this? And it's just continue until you figure it out. And then eventually you'll get it. It'll click. You know what the CFO wants, what the CIO wants, what the CEO cares about. Some people really want to know the big picture. Others just want to know what directly affects them and what's wrong. Some people want to see everything. They want to see what's in progress, what's on track, what's behind. Others just want to see what's behind. It's really figuring out, like, what do you want? What do you want to see? If you're developing a dashboard, send it to them. Be like, hey, I'm creating a dashboard for that presentation. This is what I'm thinking. What do you think? I want to make sure this fits with what you're looking for. And you don't have to send it to everybody, but just, get those relationships. It's almost like that back channel communication to make sure that, you're hitting the mark and you're all on the same team once you get to the executive level. It's not like you really have to worry about, the rat race of climbing up the ladder anymore. You're at that point where you should all be working together to make sure that everything you do kind of complements the organization and really meets what it needs. So there really shouldn't be any, why are you sending me this? I don't care. Do what you want. And luckily I've never encountered that.
Mm-hmm.
I've encountered it once, and, in that meeting when I presented it, asked a bunch of questions, and it was, all right, you can get combative, or you can just say, duly noted. I'll make those changes for the next meeting. And that's where, the empathy and the humility come into play. Maybe that person didn't have time just to look at my slides or to give me feedback. I don't know their story, so I can't, put a value judgment on them. Just take it what it is. Be solutions oriented, and, make it happen.
Yeah, I think you have to assume that everyone has in their heart, the desire to do the right thing for the organization, for the community, for the customers, right? And usually that ends up working out okay. Yeah. And it's interesting that what you're saying, and I wanted to call it out, is if you don't know what people want to see, just ask them. I mean, it sounds simple enough, but I know oftentimes I'm hesitant to ask because I don't want to look like I don't know. And I have to remind myself that it's okay not to know everything. It's fine. Nobody knows everything.
My mentor told me one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever been given when I was a help desk tech. It was like, as a tech, there's way too much for you to know. I don't expect you to know everything, but what I do expect you is to be able to find that information.
Hmm.
How do you find that information? If it's not out there, just open your mouth and ask.
Yeah.
There's no shame in that. There's no shame in the game when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's worse to not ask. It's almost like it's better to have and not need than need and not have.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather ask and have them come back and say, this is perfect, than I'm just going to present one, and hope for the best. It's a 2-second check. If they say no and they don't have time, then the first outcome took place either way. But at least I asked, and maybe a better outcome could have happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And, certainly, though, if you keep asking the same person, the same set of questions over and over again, okay, they're going to get annoyed, right? So you do have the burden of listening to the answer and making sure you understand it. But this is where I think someone who's new to the organization, for a while, I don't know how long that is, a few months perhaps, people generally understand that you need time to ask questions to become familiar with the organization, who's who. Yeah.
Absolutely. If you're asking the same questions for a year, that's going to call into question your competency for the role. But, 3 months, it takes time to learn an organization, and anybody who's been in your shoes previously, or in any executive, they know. I mean, you come in and you're expected to be a leader, and you're expected to lead a bunch of people when you really don't know their qualifications, their stories, their mental state. You know nothing about them, and you're just expected to lead this entire department of people from day one with like 100% efficiency. I was like, okay.
Yeah, but there's a lot of pressure, I think, maybe people put on themselves. I know that anytime I started a new role, I did think that others expected me to be fully effective as soon as I came in. And maybe it was just something that I convinced myself of, and probably was not tied to a reality, but it's stressful. You start a new job, people are looking at you, who is this person? You got to start establishing rapport and making sure people respect you. And I mean, I don't know if that was the case. If you still remember, that was about 3 years ago for you. I joined Axonius a year ago, so it's fresher in my mind, but it was stressful for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's and it's one of those feeler conversations I like to tell people to have during the interview process itself. When I come in, what do you expect out of me the first month, the first 3 months, the first 6 months? What do you have in mind for this position? So you can see if that even matches up with really what you want. I mean, you may not want to chart that path for your career. You may not like any of that stuff. But again, if you don't ask the questions, you never know. So I'd rather ask more questions and find out everything I need than just kind of assume that it's going to be like any other role that I've held in the past. And, you know, I know there's going to be some differences, but like for this role, it was a completely different, you know, vertical for me. So there was a lot of unknowns, but some people like a challenge. Masochist, I don't know, masochist, sadicist, I don't know what the word is, but you know.
Well, I mean, look, there are people who just really want to go deep into a particular industry and they truly get to know, I don't know, the financial services sector or the energy sector, right? And that's exciting, and that's the value that they bring, having that really multi-year, decade, if not more, expertise. Others perhaps like to change their context. I suspect there is no right or wrong approach to this, right? You just got to understand what kind of a person you are.
Just, it's always find what you like and be really good at that thing. I mean, I tell that to my analysts. We all have to be kind of a generalist in some regard, but find that one area you love and go for it. You know, I like building programs. I like building security. I like building things. I like doing the technical things, red teaming, purple teaming, incident response, DevSecOps, all the fun, you know, buzzwords that you can throw out there. But at the end of the day, what gives me the most joy? Taking something, putting my stamp on it, and making it better, and then helping others make their programs better. So if I can do that, I'm a happy guy. And that's kind of why I've jumped, you know, from industry, startups to military to government, manufacturing to now healthcare. It's always finding that next company, regardless of industry, that just, you know, that needs help and needs help building their program. And there's never a shortage of that. And really, there's never a shortage of that within an organization, because you're always going to have to evolve and stay current. So.
Yeah, and I really liked what you said earlier, so I thought to kind of emphasize it, that when you're coming into a new company, especially when you're switching to a new industry, you already, unless you're brand new to security, right? Maybe out of college or some other program, you probably already have some baseline knowledge that qualified you for this position. I like the idea of mapping it, perhaps in your mind or sometimes on a piece of paper. I know PCI, I'm now in Hightrust, here's where the similarities are. And all of a sudden, it's not brand new, right? Security is security, CIA, if you subscribe to that model, applies pretty much everywhere. You can make it work.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people have seen it, but in the movie The Interview with James Franco, one of those, it's same, but different, but still same. Like, it really relates to what you just said and what we talked about earlier. Like, everything's the same, yet everything's different. So it's just really figuring out how to make those connections. And then once you do, it's like light bulbs. And then all of a sudden, okay, I can do this. This isn't so overwhelming. It's just different.
So you mentioned starting out as a help desk technician, right? Did I get that right? That was one of your earlier.
Way help desk tech, and then a network technician, system admin, and then analyst, engineer. I've really done kind of all those roles. The generalized roles. I say I've never been, you know, like a dedicated incident response person, or I've never been, you know, a dedicated red teamer. Those have always been side roles to what I've always done, but you know, architect, engineer, analyst, help desk tech, system admin, network admin, I've kind of, you know, manager, director, ISO. I've held all those roles. Yeah.
So how did you manage your movement up the pyramid, so to speak? I mean, it didn't just happen, right? You start out somewhere and then you think, I want to be promoted. I want to do more. I want to learn more. How do you stay motivated? How do you find a way to acquire new skills? How do you do that? Any advice for others?
I mean, the motivation really kind of comes from within. I mean, myself particular, I'm one of those people who it's one of the reasons why I work out so much and why I study so much. I have to exhaust myself mentally and physically every single day, or I'm not falling asleep at night. So what do? I work out twice a day, and when I'm not working out, I'm studying or I'm taking classes. And I love to learn, you know, no matter what it is. If I wasn't an InfoSec, I'd still be learning. I mean, whether it be cooking classes, you know, physics classes, it's just I love to learn new things and know more about the world around me. So that's just kind of the type of person that I am. With regards to career progression, it was really asking for those responsibilities. You know, when I got in, when I was a help desk,
just give me
yeah,
more.
I asked for it. Well, it was, can I shadow, when I was a system admin, for example, there was a security team. I was like, you know, they were the cool guys. They were kind of like the secret squirrels. They were doing the things that nobody knew what they were. You know, they were the hackers. They were the awesome people. I was like, I want to know what they do. That sounds interesting. Hey, Bob, you mind if I shadow one of them for a day and just see what they do? And then, hey, I can help you. You know, I can help you out with that. You mind if, you know, just ask. It never hurts. And I mean, no security team that I'm aware of is ever going to be like, nah, I got enough people. We're totally good. I don't need any help at all.
Yeah.
So it was readily accepted. You know, they're like, absolutely. We'll almost treat you like as an intern. And then, you know, when I was an analyst, I was with the engineer. Hey, do you need any help with anything? And just, and you get those skills. Management can see that you're hungry. And, you know, if it opens up in that organization, great. If not, you at least did the job. And then when you lateral, you know, when you transfer out from an analyst to that engineer role, you've been doing it in your work because you've asked for it. Or you can always do the self-start route and, you know, try and build a lab in your home, which I think all of us should do in general. You know, we should always be experimenting with stuff, and then translate that into, you know, how you can make improvements at work.
Yeah, because some of the things that you just mentioned, or you need to establish a reputation within your organization, right? So that when you ask someone, hey, can I hang out with you for a day and help you out? They were like, I don't trust this guy. No, right? No. You want to establish that reputation, right? And probably if you don't already have a certain skill set, before you ask and are seen as a complete noob and nobody wants to deal with you, work on it in your own lab, experiment, and then say, I don't know, hey, can I shadow you on your next red teaming engagement? I've been experimenting with, I don't know, Nmap at home, and want to see how you would do like this, right? You got to build, I think, at least a little bit of a background before you approach somebody. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to have a relationship with them. You can't go up to a complete stranger and be like, hey, I want to know, you know how you do your job. Teach me everything. Because then they're going to be like, you want my job? Absolutely not. But I had it happen within my own org about a month ago. You know, someone in a completely different department was like, hey, I was thinking of, you know, transitioning into InfoSec. What do I do? Where do I start? And that's the kind of person I want to be in InfoSec. I don't want someone to just fell into the role. I want that person who's hungry, like, teach me, where do I got to go? What do I need to learn? You know, where can I start? And it's always, you know, absolutely. You want book recommendations. There's free courses you can take. Heck, hang out with my team for a day if you can manage it, and we'll show you, you know, what it's all about. It's awesome when that happens. So yeah.
And I like, I don't know, somehow I haven't thought of that. Just the advice of just shadowing somebody for a day or two, you know, because I suspect that there's a lot of incorrect expectations regarding what some of the security roles entail. You know, hey, those pen testers, they're hackers. I don't know. Do you have to wear a hoodie if you want to be in pen testing? You know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's got to be a hoodie. But I remember even in high school when I was thinking, what do I want to be when I grow up? I was good with numbers and I liked math, and I thought I'm going to be an accountant. I had no idea what that actually meant, but it sounded good. And then I realized that no, I'd be horrible at accounting. I am not that organized. But I think the same might go for a lot of people in IT or security that think they want a particular role, but they won't know it until they can see that role through somebody else's eyes. That's very helpful.
Yeah. I mean, you never know. You never know until you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds kind of cliche, but it's true. I mean, there's so much out there, and unless you experiment, you know, with all facets of it. Like, I never knew I absolutely hated disk forensics, but I love memory forensics. Until I actually picked up a book and dove in. And why, I have absolutely no idea. But until I tried it, you know, you don't know. And that's where really having a mentor, having someone to talk to really does, you know, kind of make a difference. So, you know, for those people who are interested in the security field, you don't need to be in the security field to be like an ISSA member, you know, or some of those local, conferences, or, well, when they were meeting in person, you know, you can go and talk to people and just get immersed in the culture and see if it's for you. You know, go talk to people. Go meet an incident responder. Go meet someone in law enforcement who does forensics all day long. Ask, like, what do you do every day? Oh, you literally look at ones and zeros in hex all day. I have no desire to do that. What do you do? Oh, that's awesome. I like it. And that's, yeah.
And so, so we talked earlier about what you do as a CISO, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about that, because in many security professionals' minds, that's like the top of the career progression. I don't know, Jeff, what you're planning to do now that you have reached the top. Maybe you're ready to retire. But
mentally, sure. Financially, absolutely not.
But I think that a lot of people imagine this career progression. I don't know, you start maybe a help desk, then you become a senior help desk, then sysadmin, then security analyst, then you manage a team, then you manage a bigger team. What you talked about a bunch of emails that you have. You talked about back-to-back calls. What type of activities end up consuming most of your time? I wanted to talk about those types of activities for those who are wondering, should I think about CISO being on along the lines of my career progression?
Yeah, so I mean, some of it is reporting, creating, the dashboards, giving the presentations to executives, the weekly updates of the status of our projects, the status of the security posture. A lot of it is, new business, new products, new services that the company is thinking of onboarding. New health plans that we have to deal with, going through some of that. It's a lot, I'd say it's 50-50 business/business technical. Not necessarily technical, but sometimes you're dealing with ROI and forecasting and budgeting and hiring and training budgets and all of that stuff. And then the other part of your time, performance management of your employees, continuous improvement. And the other time you're dealing within those meetings where you're meeting with a potential new vendor, during risk assessments of third party, external pen tests, internal pen tests, supervising those, being on the change management board. There's all these kind of other responsibilities where, a lot of people, and I did as well. I thought, you can make it to the top and still have your hands on keyboard as much as I did, when I was an analyst or an engineer. Like, I could still really get down to the weeds. And sometimes I can. Audit season, absolutely not. But sometimes I actually can sit in the meetings and give my input. But a lot of the time, I'm the one providing the strategy, and then I have to step back and trust my people to actually implement things. And that's kind of like the biggest shift, moving from an engineer, an architect, to a director or a senior director or an ISO or a CISO, is you don't get that opportunity very often. I still get my fix, I guess you could say, like when I go home, because I still do classes, I still read, I still practice, the dark arts of quote, hacking and pen testing and all of that in my spare time. But that doesn't happen during my work there very often. And that's something that, a lot of people may want to just consider is, do you want to lead? Do you want to be the visionary who directs, or do you want to be the person who does?
And that's such a crucial distinction. And I'm finding myself as well, I like to be technical. I've got side projects that allow me to get the fix, as you put it. But I don't have much time, nor should I, frankly, in my job to do the hands-on stuff. And I think that will make a lot of people unhappy. And that's why I wanted to bring that up. There are a lot of technologists who just love the tech. The problem, I think, or maybe the challenge, is that anywhere in the world of IT, it's very hard to find a career progression where at some point, to keep moving up and earning more money and getting more respect and responsibility, you don't have to be a manager of people. It's hard. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be that way. How did you know, if at all, you wanted to be a manager of people? How did you make that transition?
Well, actually, for me, that came when I was in the military. As you progress through the ranks, as enlisted as an officer, you gradually attain, you're in charge of the people underneath you. And when I was in that role, I really found like, hey, I like this. This is awesome. I didn't realize I liked teaching people until I was actually in a position where I kind of almost had to teach people. And then I realized this is fantastic. I get to impart my skills to them. They get to take those skills to the next level and grow beyond where anything I could ever hope to imagine. But it's almost like building a program. I have a little I contributed a little bit to that, and that's amazing. Same with like my role now. It's like if I see, we pass now with flying colors, or we meet a vendor and they're astounded at, our security posture, I put a little stamp on that. My name's at the top of it, but at the same time, don't get a big head and forget that your success is literally because of all the people that you manage. I mean, that's, everybody's met that CISO who thinks they're Zeus come down to the land of the mortals, and I'm gracing you with my presence. Be happy that I'm in the same room with you. These people literally make you who you are. So it's always, recognize their success. Own the failures, you recognize their success. That's kind of, one of my tickets, my keys to leadership is, if something happens, I'm the first person to be like, nope, you're right. That's our bad. I'll take that. We'll fix it. Whereas if one of my guys does something good, hey, good job on that project. Thank you. But I really, I got to give all the credit to Jake. I just managed it. He was the one who implemented this from start to finish. And that's another way that they build, recognition within the organization, is because of you as a leader. You're putting their name out there and you're promoting them. You're encouraging them to do better and to strive for more.
That's a great perspective on leadership. Yeah, and not all leaders have that, by the way. I suspect we've all worked or encountered managers that perhaps should have looked for another career growth path. Do you have any advice, though your experience is different, for those people who think they want to keep growing, but maybe they don't want to be a manager of people? What do they do? Do you have individuals maybe like this on your team now or before?
Yeah, I mean, one of my best friends has been a lead incident responder for, oh dear God, 14 years, roughly, and he turns down promotions. He's like, I appreciate it. I appreciate your faith in me. I'm happy where I'm at. And honestly, for me, if I heard that, I'd be like, okay, that's great. You found what you love. You want to be a rock star in that? Maybe we can create a new role within the organization where you don't have to be a manager of people, but you can still, up your pay grade, up your salary. You don't want to be stagnant within your monetary gains over the years, but you can figure out a way to make them work. If you really want to hold on to someone, you can figure out a way as a leader to make that work.
Yeah, you just need to hope that the organization has that opportunity for you to continue making more money, keep getting promoted without having to take on people management expertise. Yeah.
And that's why some people eventually get out of the standard, corporate structure and they go more into consulting.
Yeah.
Because then you can be that incident responder or that pen tester or whatever it is that you love. And that's your bag. That's all you do day in and day out. And that's awesome. It may be an alternative route that a lot of people don't really think of. They think, I have to stay within the confines of this corporate hierarchy. Not always the case. And there are alternatives.
Doing independent consulting for some time. What was that like, and why did you decide to stop doing it?
Because I was doing it in conjunction with a full-time job, and I have a wife, and she likes seeing me every so often, not too much, but just enough. So when I'm working or I'm dealing with clients, it just became too much. I think it was a valuable learning experience though, because you get to deal with a large number of different types of people, and that can help you on your ascent. Essentially, ascent to the top. You're going to have to learn to deal with obstructionists, with worrywarts, with all different kinds of people. Some people who just logically to you don't make sense. And really, how do you address them? It's almost like learning improv, in a way, dealing with different types of people. You got to kind of figure out how to make it happen on the spot.
Hold on, you said a lot of interesting things there that I wanted to revisit. What what does it have to do with improv? Clarify that, because I'm very interested because I took some improv comedy classes in the past, and I find that they were extremely helpful for me. But I thought that was just weird. Now you bring up improv. What's the deal with that? Why do you do that?
Yeah, because I mean, you always, like, let's say you're dealing with a new client, right? You always do your background, you do your research, you think you know what you're going into. You step foot in the door, you step foot in the meeting room. Best laid plans of mice and men, it's going to go sideways at some point. So the ability to think quickly on your feet, and how you mentally trained yourself to be adaptable, it allows you to kind of shift gears and really and deal with those different types of people. And that's where I learned, just ask. That was one of those things that I had to just think on my feet. I was going bah, bah, bah in my head for a good 10 seconds. Then I finally said, screw it. What are you looking for?
Huh.
And it was receptive. I was like, okay, that works. Let me try that somewhere else. And you build up this bag of tricks that you learn over the years.
And one of the things that you also just mentioned was you were, I think, bringing up names of different kinds of people or character traits. I think you were iterating through. Can you?
Yeah, there's
that point, please.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there was, there's personality archetypes, I guess you could say, and this is going back to like my days in psychology days back in the capstone classes you had to take back in college. But there's the tank, there's all these different types of people, and how do you interact with, how do you make inroads with those different types of people? And that's where I was, and there's volumes written on this subject, that you can pick up a book and read on how to deal with I think there's 4 to 5 different main personality types that, some people are a hybrid of one or the other, or some people are literally just pure alpha all day long. And how do you deal with them? So that's where kind of being a lifelong learner pays off, because you don't think all these different areas really impact your day in security, but who would have known? I'd have been looking at my psychology textbook, after I got out of college, being like, yeah, oh my God, this was the person I just dealt with.
That's fascinating. Yeah, just realizing that people are different, taking the time to classify, at least in your mind, right? Don't tell the person that you think they're whatever you call them. But you got to interact with people differently based on just who they are. And similarly, I'm sure people interacting with you hope that they understand who you are and adjust their conversational collaboration style accordingly. And this is what I'm finding, at least in my role as well. And I think you talked about this throughout our discussion, that a significant part of the CISO's role, beyond the technology and beyond the compliance and beyond the understanding what security means, is understanding how to work with people. I know that I spend
absolutely
a lot of my time on that. Yeah.
Relationship management gets more and more important. The higher up you go. I mean, it's always important, to be cool, be kind, be professional. I mean, if you treat everybody in that way, I really don't think you can go wrong, because there's, like you said, you don't know what people are going through. There's people who are going to be obstructionists, and you just think they're being a jerk. You have no idea what they've dealt with. You don't know why they're being upset. Maybe they're afraid. Maybe they've done this in the past and it's failed. They've had you have no clue until you literally just ask the question. What's up? Why do you have reservations about this? Let's talk. You have 10 minutes? Go get a cup of coffee. Well, you used to get a cup of coffee. Let's have a Zoom chat.
Not quite as fun.
Let's sit in front of the fireplace and have a chat.
Yes. So be cool, be kind, be professional. Let's end with those words of wisdom from Jeff Gardner. Jeff, thank you very much for talking and sharing your perspective with all of our listeners.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Well, Anna, I think we're ready to close this session.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Lenny, and thank you so much, Jeffrey. And thank you to our audience for joining us today. Like I mentioned, we recorded this session, so you'll get a copy in the next few hours. In the meantime, if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me at anna@axonius.com, and I'll get you to the right person. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.